The sun was beating down hard on the highway, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer and dance above the asphalt. It was a Tuesday afternoon, but for Jenny, it felt like the longest day of the year. She was gripping the steering wheel of her old sedan so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The car was making a terrible sound, a low, grinding moan that vibrated up to the floor and into the soles of her feet. She knew that sound. She had heard it before, usually right before something expensive happened. Jenny tried to focus on the road ahead, but her eyes kept darting to the dashboard. The temperature gauge was inching its way into the red zone. It was a slow, terrifying climb. She whispered to the car, begging it to hold on, promising it an oil change if it could just get her to work and back home one more time. But the car was old, tired, and frankly, it didn't care about her promises. With a violent shudder and a cloud of white smoke that billowed out from under the hood, the engine gave up. The car lost power instantly. The power steering cut out, making the wheel feel like stone in her hands. Jenny fought to guide the heavy vehicle to the narrow shoulder of the road. She managed to coast it onto the gravel, the tires crunching loudly, and finally came to a stop just a few feet away from a fast-moving guardrail. Silence rushed in, but it wasn't peaceful. It was a heavy, suffocating silence of things gone wrong. Jenny sat there for a moment, her hands still gripping the wheel, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She took a deep breath, trying to stop the tears that were already stinging the corners of her eyes. She didn't have time for this. She was already running late for her second job, the one that paid the rent on the small apartment she shared with her younger brother. If she lost this job, she didn't know what they would do. She turned the key in the ignition. Nothing happened, just a pathetic clicking sound. She tried again. Click, click, click. It was dead. Slowly, Jenny opened the door and stepped out. The heat hit her like a physical weight. It was oppressive, stealing the air from her lungs. The air smelled of burnt rubber and hot asphalt. She walked around the front of the car and popped the hood. A thick cloud of steam hissed at her, blocking her view. She waved it away, coughing slightly, and peered into the hot, tangled mess of metal and hoses. It looked like a disaster zone to her. She didn't know anything about engines. She wouldn't know a radiator cap from an oil cap if her life depended on it. All she saw was a mess that she couldn't fix and definitely couldn't afford to fix. She pulled her phone from her pocket. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb of lines running across the glass. She had 12% battery left and no signal bars. She held the phone up in the air, walking a few steps away from the car, turning in a circle. Nothing, just the endless, empty bars of no service. A fresh wave of panic washed over her. She felt dizzy, and it wasn't just from the heat. Leaning back against the hot metal of her car door, Jenny looked out at the highway. Cars were flying past her. Some of them were big SUVs. Others were shiny sports cars. They were going so fast that the rush of air pushed against her clothes. Every few seconds, the whole car would rock slightly as a truck thundered past. She looked at the drivers. They were looking straight ahead, listening to music, talking on the phone, or sipping coffee. They were in their own little worlds, safe and cool. To them, she was just a blur on the side of the road, a problem that wasn't theirs. She felt incredibly small. It was a strange feeling, standing there on the edge of all that motion and noise, yet being completely invisible. She felt like a ghost. The world was moving on without her, and she was stuck in this moment of failure. She thought about the rent money that was due in 3 days. She thought about her brother, waiting for her to come home with groceries. She thought about the landlord who had already warned them about late payments. "Okay," she said out loud, her voice sounding small and dry in the open air. "Think, Jenny. Just think." She knew she couldn't stay there. It was dangerous, and the heat was getting worse. She would have to walk. She looked down the highway. The next exit was miles away. She wasn't even sure how many miles, but she knew it was too far to walk in the sun. But what choice did she have? She couldn't sit here forever. She reached back into the car to grab her purse. As she slung it over her shoulder, she felt a tear finally escape and roll down her cheek. It was hot, just like the air. She wiped it away angrily. She didn't want to cry. Crying didn't fix engines. Crying didn't pay the rent. Jenny locked the car. even though she knew there was nothing inside worth stealing. It was just a habit. She started to walk along the shoulder, keeping as far away from the speeding traffic as she could. The gravel crunched under her shoes. Every step felt heavy. The heat, radiating up from the ground, was brutal. Her head began to throb. She had been walking for maybe 5 minutes when she heard a different sound behind her. It wasn't the loud roar of a truck or the whoosh of a passing sedan. It was a low, smooth hum, an engine that sounded powerful but controlled. Jenny turned around, squinting against the bright sun. She saw a dark car slowing down as it approached her. It was a beautiful, sleek vehicle, the kind she only saw in magazines or on TV screens at the electronics store. It was a vintage Porsche, painted a deep, dark color that seemed to swallow the sunlight. For a second, her heart raced with fear. Was this person stopping to yell at her for being too close to the road? Or was it something worse? She gripped the strap of her purse tighter and stepped further back toward the guardrail. The car eased onto the gravel behind her broken-down sedan. It didn't stop abruptly. It glided into a smooth stop. Jenny stood frozen, watching. The engine went quiet. The door on the driver's side opened. It wasn't a heavy door. It swung open easily and gracefully. A man stepped out. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt, blue jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a regular guy, maybe a little tired but calm. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at Jenny's car, then at her, then back at the car. He closed his door gently and walked toward her. Jenny noticed his walk. It wasn't rushed or aggressive. He had a relaxed way of moving, his hands loose at his sides. As he got closer, Jenny recognized him. Her eyes went wide. She knew that face. Everyone knew that face. It was Keanu Reeves. But seeing him on a movie screen and seeing him standing on the side of a dusty highway were two completely different things. He looked real. He looked human. He looked like someone who just wanted to help. He stopped a few feet away from her, giving her plenty of space. He didn't want to scare her. He took off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that looked kind and worried. "Hey," he said. His voice was soft, casual. "Are you okay?" Jenny felt her throat tighten. She nodded, but then she shook her head. I think my car is dead," she managed to say. Her voice cracked. Keanu looked past her at the sedan. He could see the steam still rising faintly from the hood. "It looks like it gave up the ghost," he said, a small, sympathetic smile touching his lips. "That's not good. Do you need any help? I know a little bit about cars. Or at least enough to be dangerous." Jenny stood there, stunned. The most famous actor in the world was standing on the side of the highway in the blistering heat, asking if he could look at her broken car. She looked at his expensive car, then at her worn-out sneakers, then back at him. It didn't make sense. I don't have any money," she blurted out, feeling her face burn with shame. "I can't pay for a tow truck or anything." Keanu held up a hand gently, shaking his head. "Who said anything about money? I'm just a guy stopping to see if another human being is all right. It's too hot to be walking out here." He walked past her toward her car. Jenny turned to watch him. He didn't walk like a movie star acting cool. He walked with purpose. He reached the car and looked at the smoking engine. He didn't hesitate. He pulled the hood up higher and peered inside. He wiped his hands on his jeans before touching anything, being careful not to burn himself. Jenny walked over slowly. The heat seemed a little more bearable now that she wasn't alone. She watched as he inspected the engine, moving hoses around with careful fingers. He wasn't posing for cameras. There were no cameras. It was just the two of them and the sound of the traffic rushing by. He said, straightening up and wiping a smudge of grease from his forehead. "It looks like a radiator hose blew. I see coolant everywhere. This isn't something we can fix with a duct tape and a prayer." Jenny felt her stomach drop. "So I'm stuck." "Not stuck," Keanu said, looking at her with a serious expression. "Just temporarily delayed." The words, temporarily delayed, hung in the hot air between them. Jenny wanted to believe him. She really did, but her stomach was tied in a tight knot. She looked at the puddle of bright green coolant spreading underneath her car, mixing with the dust on the ground. It looked like toxic waste to her, a bright green sign that her life was about to get much harder. Keanu must have noticed the look on her face, because he softened his voice even more. He didn't look at her with pity, which he was grateful for. He looked at her like he understood exactly how much trouble a broken car could be. "Listen," he said, turning away from the smoking engine and leaning against the side of her car. He crossed his arms, relaxing his posture. "I can call a tow truck for you. I have a service I use. They are usually pretty quick." Jenny shook her head quickly, panic rising in her throat again. "No, I can't afford a tow truck today. I literally have $5 in my bank account until Friday. I was just hoping to make it to work and back." Keanu looked at her for a long moment. He didn't blink. He didn't look away. He just took in the information, processing it without making her feel like a charity case. Then he stood up straight and pulled his phone from his pocket. "Don't worry about the cost right now. Let's just get the car off the road. It's dangerous sitting here." He walked a few steps away to make the call. Jenny watched him. He spoke quietly into the phone, giving their location. He didn't use his name to get special treatment. He just sounded like a regular guy asking for help. While he was on the phone, Jenny leaned back against the hot metal of her car and closed her eyes. The sun was relentless. It felt like it was pressing down on her shoulders, trying to crush her into the pavement. She felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. It wasn't just physical tiredness. It was a heavy weight of trying to keep everything together when the strings were constantly snapping. A few minutes later, Keanu walked back. He reached into his car and pulled out a bottle of cold water. He twisted the cap off and handed it to her. "Here," he said. "You need this more than I do." Jenny took the bottle. The condensation felt cold against her fingers. She took a long sip, the cold water shocking her system and helping to clear her head a little. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to stop. Most people didn't." Keanu shrugged, a small, humble movement. "It's a hot day. Nobody should be stuck out here alone. Besides," he gestured toward the lifeless highway, "we're all just driving along, trying to get somewhere. Sometimes a machine breaks. It happens to the best of us." They stood there for a while in the shade of his Porsche, waiting for the tow truck. It was a strange silence, comfortable but heavy. Jenny found herself wanting to talk to him. Maybe it was a shock of the situation, or maybe it was just his calm presence. But she felt like she could tell him the truth. She didn't have to pretend that everything was fine, the way she did with her boss or her friends. "This car wasn't just a car to me," Jenny said quietly, looking down at her sneakers. "I know it's a piece of junk, but it was my freedom. My brother and I, we live pretty far out. We moved there because it was cheaper. But without this car, I can't get to my job. And if I lose the job, we lose the apartment. It's a domino effect, you know?" Keanu listened intently. He didn't check his watch. He didn't look at his phone. He looked right at her, nodding slowly. "I know what you mean," he said softly. "Life has a way of piling up on you. One thing goes wrong, and suddenly the whole wall is shaking. It's scary." "It is," Jenny said, feeling a tear escape again. She quickly wiped it away. "I'm sorry. I'm crying in front of a movie star. This is so embarrassing." He let out a short, gentle laugh. "Hey, I cried too. I'm just a person. And honestly, standing on the side of the road in 90-degree heat is a perfectly good reason to cry. I'd probably be crying too if my car broke down." Jenny smiled a little despite herself. He made it seem so simple. He wasn't acting like he was better than her. He was just there, sharing the sidewalk, sharing the burden of the bad day. "Is it hard?" Jenny asked before she could stop herself. "Being you?" Keanu looked out at the traffic speeding past. A thoughtfulness crossed his face. "It has its moments," he said. "But everyone has their own battles, right? Everyone has something they are carrying around that you can't see. I've had my share of loss. I think when you go through things like that, you realize that stuff, money, cars, fame, it doesn't really protect you from life. It doesn't stop you from hurting. So you learn to have empathy. You learn that the most important thing is just to be kind to people, because you never know what kind of day they are having." Jenny looked at him with new eyes. She saw past the fame and the movies. She saw someone who had known pain and had come out the other side, wanting to help ease the pain of others. It wasn't an act. It was genuine. It was in the way he stood, the way he spoke, the way he offered a simple bottle of water. A loud rumble broke the quiet moment. A large flatbed tow truck was pulling up behind them, its yellow lights flashing. The driver, a big man with a beard, hopped out and looked at the situation. He did a double take when he saw Keanu standing there, but he quickly recovered and did his job. He was professional and fast. Jenny watched as the man hooked up her car. It looked so small and pathetic on the back of the big truck. Her lifeline was being taken away. The driver walked over to her with a clipboard. "Where do you want taken, miss?" the driver asked, his pen ready. Jenny opened her mouth, but no words came out. She didn't have a mechanic. She couldn't afford a mechanic. And even if she did, how would she get there? She stood frozen, the reality of her helplessness crashing down on her again. The driver was waiting, looking at her expectantly. The pressure was too much. She felt the panic rising in her chest, choking her. She looked at Keanu. He was looking at the driver, then back at her. He stepped in gently, bridging the gap. "Can you take it to the nearest reputable shop?" Keanu asked the driver. "Not the dealership, just a good honest mechanic?" The driver nodded and named a place a few miles down the road. "Yeah, they're good people, but there will be a tow fee." Keanu nodded. "That's fine." He looked at Jenny. "Is that okay with you? We can get it to a shop and at least get a diagnosis. Then we can figure out the next step." Jenny nodded numbly. "Okay, yeah, thank you." The driver finished the paperwork and got back into the cab. The engine roared to life, and the truck pulled away, carrying Jenny's car. She watched it go until it was just a speck in the distance. Then she turned back to Keanu. The silence was back. Now that the car was gone, the adrenaline that had kept her going was starting to fade, leaving her feeling shaky and empty. She looked up and down the highway. There was no sidewalk. There was just the gravel shoulder and the speeding cars. She was miles from home. She had no phone signal. She had no car. She looked at Keanu, feeling awkward. "Well," she said, forcing a weak smile, "I guess I start walking now." Keanu looked at her like she was crazy. "Walking? Where?" "Home. Or to a bus stop. I'll figure it out." He shook his head firmly. "It's too far to walk in this heat. You'll get heat stroke before you make a mile. Come on." He walked over to the passenger side of his Porsche and opened the door. It wasn't a heavy door. It opened smoothly, revealing a pristine interior that smelled like leather and new car. Jenny hesitated. She felt grubby and sweaty. She didn't want to get his nice seats dirty. "Really, I can just—" "Jenny," he said, using her name for the first time. He didn't say it loudly, but there was a command in his voice that was impossible to ignore. "Get in the car, please." She looked at him, and she saw that he wasn't going to take no for an answer. He wasn't doing this to be polite. He was doing it because he genuinely cared if she made it home safely. She took a deep breath and walked toward the car. She slid into the passenger seat. It was incredibly comfortable, cool, and quiet inside. The roar of the highway was muffled by the thick glass and the solid doors. It felt like a different world. Keanu got into the driver's side. He put on his seatbelt and turned the key. The engine purred to life, a sound of power and precision. He checked his mirrors and signaled, easing the car back onto the highway. As they picked up speed, merging smoothly into the flow of traffic, Jenny let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for hours. She watched the scenery fly by through the window. She was in a car driven by a movie star, on her way to God knows where, and for the first time all day, she felt safe. "So," Keanu said, glancing over at her quickly before turning his eyes back to the road. "Tell me about this brother of yours. What's his name?" "His name is Sam," Jenny said, her voice sounding a little hollow in the quiet car. She turned her head to look out the window, watching the blur of the scenery. The Porsche was so smooth that it felt like they were gliding over the road rather than driving on it. "He's 19. He's supposed to start community college in the fall. He's smart, really smart. He just needs a chance." Keanu kept his eyes on the road, his hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. He nodded slowly, encouraging her to continue. "That's a big responsibility," he said softly. "You're carrying a lot on your shoulders for two people." "He doesn't know how bad it is," Jenny admitted, feeling a knot form in her throat. "I try to hide it from him. I work double shifts so he can focus on his grades." I tell him everything is fine. I tell him the car is great, the apartment is great. But truthfully, we are one paycheck away from being on the street. And today, she trailed off, looking down at her hands in her lap. Today broke the camel's back. No car means no job. No job means no apartment. Then Sam has to drop out and get a job just to help us survive. It ruins his future. That's what scares me the most. Not for me, but for him. The car was silent for a moment, save for the low hum of the engine and the sound of the turn signal clicking softly as Keanu changed lanes. He didn't interrupt her with empty promises. He didn't say, "It will all work out." He just let her speak. He let the reality of her situation sit there in the air between them, heavy and real. "I know what it's like to want to protect someone," Keanu said finally. His voice was lower now, quieter. "To want to carry the weight so they don't have to. It's a noble thing, but it's exhausting. You can't run yourself into the ground, Jenny. If you collapse, who holds up Sam then?" Jenny looked over at him. The sun was catching the side of his face, highlighting the lines of worry around his eyes. He looked tired, in a deep, fundamental way that resonated with her. He wasn't just a rich actor playing a role. He looked like a man who had seen his own share of dark days. "I don't have a choice," she said simply. "You do what you have to do for family." "You're right," he said. "You do. But sometimes the universe throws you a curveball. And sometimes, just sometimes, strangers stop on the highway." He offered her a small, gentle smile. And for the first time that day, Jenny felt a tiny flicker of hope ignite in her chest. It wasn't a solution to her problems, but it was a moment of connection. She realized that in this high-speed, expensive car, she was being seen. She wasn't just a broken-down statistic on the side of the road. She was a human being with a story, and he was listening. They drove for a while longer. The highway began to give way to city streets. The buildings got taller, and the traffic got a little thicker. Jenny watched the street signs, try to figure out where he was taking her. She hadn't given him her address. She assumed he was just driving toward the nearest metro station or a bus depot to drop her off. "Look," Jenny said, breaking the silence. She felt guilty taking up more of his time. "I can get a bus from here. Or an Uber. I have a little bit of cash on me. You've already done so much. I don't want to hold you up any longer. I know you're probably busy." Keanu didn't slow down. He shook his head slightly. "I'm not in a rush. And I'm not dropping you at a bus stop in this heat. We're almost there." "Almost where?" she asked, confusion creeping into her voice. "You'll see," he said. His tone was calm, but there was a firmness underneath it. He wasn't asking her permission. He was quietly taking charge of the situation. Jenny sat back in the leather seat, feeling a mix of gratitude and anxiety. She wondered where this was going. She worried about the tow truck fee. She worried about the cost of fixing the radiator. Even if the car was fixed, would it be reliable? How many more times could she patch it up before it died for good? "Can I ask you something?" Keanu asked suddenly. "Of course. If you could wave a magic wand right now," he said, glancing over at her, "what would you need? Not what you want, but what you actually need to make this work." Jenny thought about it. She thought about the eviction, notice taped to her door at home. She thought about the empty refrigerator. She thought about Sam's textbooks. "I need a miracle," she said honestly. "I need a car that starts when I turn the key. I need a job that's close enough to walk to if I have to. I just need stability. I'm so tired of the ground moving under my feet." Keanu nodded. He didn't say anything, but his jaw tightened slightly. He was thinking hard. The car slowed down as they approached a large intersection. Up ahead, Jenny saw a tall flag waving in the wind. It was colorful with big, bold letters. As they got closer, she realized it was a car dealership. Her heart skipped a beat. "Why are we here?" Keanu signaled and turned the wheel smoothly, guiding the Porsche into the dealership lot. "We need to assess the damage," he said. "We need to know if your car is worth saving or if we need to explore other options." "I can't buy a car," Jenny said, her voice rising in panic. "I told you, I don't have any money. Please, let's just turn around." "Relax," Keanu said, parking the car in a visitor spot near the main showroom building. Nobody is asking you to buy anything right now. We are just looking. Knowledge is power. Come on. He turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. Jenny looked at the bright, shiny cars lined up in rows in front of the glass building. They looked like alien spaceships to her, sleek, perfect, and completely out of reach. She fell out of place in her grease-stained t-shirt and worn-out jeans. I feel stupid, she whispered. Keanu opened his door. Don't. You're just doing life. We're all just doing life. Come on. He walked around the car and opened her door before she could reach for the handle. It was such a simple gesture, so old-fashioned and polite, that it nearly made her tear up again. She stepped out, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. They walked toward the showroom entrance. The sliding glass doors parted automatically, welcoming them into a blast of freezing cold air conditioning. It smelled of coffee and fresh tires. The floor was so clean it sparkled. Salespeople in suits were walking around with clipboards. Jenny saw them look up. She saw their eyes widen as they recognized a man walking next to her. She saw the whispers start, the nudges between colleagues. But Keanu ignored all of it. He didn't look at the salespeople. He looked at the cars. He didn't head toward the sports cars or the luxury sedans. He walked past the flashy convertibles with the hoods open. He walked deeper into the showroom, toward the back where the practical cars were kept. He stopped in front of a vehicle that looked sturdy and reliable. It was a four-door sedan, nothing flashy, but it looked safe. It had a reputation for lasting a long time. Keanu walked around it, running his hand along the metal of the roof. He checked the tires. He looked at the safety rating sticker on the window. Jenny stood a few feet back, feeling like she was in a dream. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Keanu turned to face her. He put his hands in his pockets. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You said you need stability," he said. "You said you need something that starts when you turn the key. You're worried about Sam. You're worried about losing your job." "Yes," she said, confused. "But I can't." "I know," he interrupted gently. "I heard you, but I've been where you are. Not exactly, maybe, but I know what it feels like to lose everything, to have the ground disappear. And when you're in that hole, you don't need a lecture. You don't need a pep talk. You need a rope, someone to throw you a line, so you can climb out." A salesperson, a tall man with a bright smile, started walking toward them, sensing a potential sale. Keanu held up a hand to pause him, keeping his eyes locked on Jenny. "I'm not a rich man who doesn't know what to do with his money," Keanu said, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. "I'm just a guy who had a really good day, and I want to share it. I want you to have this car." Jenny stood frozen. The air conditioning in the showroom felt too cold suddenly. She couldn't process what he was saying. It was too big. It was too much. You can't be serious. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Keanu said. "I know you're trying your best. I know you love your brother. And I know that life kicked you in the teeth today. Let me fix it. Let me do this for Sam. Let me do this for you." The salesperson reached them, looking between the two of them, sensing the heavy atmosphere. "Can I help you folks? Are you interested in the sedan?" Keanu didn't look at the salesman. He kept his eyes on Jenny, waiting for her answer. The noise of the dealership seemed to fade away. The other people, the shiny cars, the smell of coffee, it all disappeared. There was just Keanu, standing there with a look of pure compassion, offering her a lifeline she never expected to catch. The salesman stood there with his polite, professional smile frozen on his face, waiting for someone to speak. He looked from the famous actor to the young woman in the worn-out clothes, trying to figure out the dynamic. Was this a prank? Was this a daughter? An assistant? He cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence that had fallen over the shiny showroom floor. "Sir," the salesman said, directing his attention to Keanu, "are you interested in this vehicle for a trade-in? Or perhaps a second car for the family?" Jenny felt her face burn. She wanted to run out of the glass doors and keep running until her legs gave out. The gap between her world and this world was too wide. It felt wrong to be standing here, surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of machinery, talking about buying a brand new car when she had $5 in her bank account. "No," Keanu said. His voice was steady and calm, cutting through the awkwardness. "We are buying this car. For her." He pointed a finger gently at Jenny. The salesman blinked, clearly taken aback. He looked at Jenny, then back at Keanu, his brain trying to process the information. "Oh," the salesman said, his smile shifting into something more genuine and surprised. "Oh, I see. Well, that is incredibly generous. Let me just grab some paperwork, and we can get started." Keanu turned to Jenny. She was shaking her head, backing up a step. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't do this. I can't. I literally can't. I don't know how I would ever pay you back. It's not right." She felt like she was drowning. The kindness was too much. It was heavier than the heat, heavier than the stress of the morning. It felt like a weight she couldn't carry. "Hey," Keanu said softly. He stepped closer, blocking out the view of the shiny car and the staring salesman. "Look at me." Jenny looked up. His eyes were kind, but there was a strength behind them that wouldn't let her look away. "I am not a bank," he said. "I am not a loan shark. I am not asking you to sign a contract, giving me your firstborn. I am just a person who saw another person in trouble. I have more than I need, Jenny. You have less than you need. It's simple math. It's just balancing the scales a little bit. But it's a car," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not a sandwich. It's not $20. It's a whole car. It is metal and glass and rubber," he said. "It is a machine. That's all. But what it represents, safety for you and Sam, that is priceless. Don't look at the price tag. Look at what it does. It gets you to work. It gets Sam to school. It stops the worry. Can you accept it for that? Can you accept it for Sam?" Jenny felt the tears spill over. She couldn't stop them. She thought of Sam waiting at home, probably worried sick because she was late. She thought of him walking to the bus stop in the dark if she lost her job. She thought of the fear leaving his eyes if she pulled up in a reliable car. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and nodded. She couldn't speak. She just nodded. Keanu smiled. It was a warm, relieved smile. "Good. That's good. Come on. Let's go sign the papers." They followed the salesman to a small glass desk near the back of the showroom. The air conditioning was humming loudly, a stark contrast to the hot sun outside. The salesman moved quickly, visibly excited to be part of such a transaction, but trying hard to remain professional. He placed a stack of papers on the desk and slid a pen toward Keanu. Keanu didn't sit in the big chair behind the desk. He pulled another chair around and sat next to Jenny. He didn't want to be across from her. He wanted to be on her side. He read through the documents carefully, asking questions about the warranty, checking the safety features, and making sure there were no hidden fees. He haggled slightly over the delivery charge, not because he needed the money, but because it was a principle of the thing. He treated the purchase with the same seriousness he would treat a business deal, ensuring Jenny got the best possible deal. Jenny sat there in a daze. She watched his hands, strong, capable hands, as he signed his name on the line after line. He didn't sign it like a celebrity signing an autograph for a fan. He signed it with a quick, efficient scrawl. Just a guy buying a car. When they got to the payment section, he pulled out a simple black credit card. He handed it to the salesman. The salesman took it with two hands, as if it were made of gold, and hurried away to process it. While they were alone for a moment, Keanu turned to her. "Do you know how to drive a car with a backup camera?" he asked. Jenny shook her head. "My old car didn't even have power windows." He smiled. "It's easy. The screen lights up when you put it in reverse. It shows you what's behind you. It's like having eyes in the back of your head. It makes parking much less stressful." "Thank you," Jenny whispered. The words felt inadequate. They felt too small for what he was doing. "I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." "Like I said," Keanu said, leaning back in the chair, "I've been there. I've been in a spot where I didn't know where the next meal was coming from. I know what that darkness feels like. If you can help someone out of the dark, you do it. You don't think about it. You just turn on the light." The salesman came back, beaming. The transaction was approved. He handed the keys to Keanu. They were on a simple plastic keychain. But to Jenny, they looked like the keys to a castle. "She's all yours," the salesman said. "Full tank of gas, ready to go." Keanu took the keys. He held them for a moment, looking at them. Then he placed them gently in Jenny's open palm. He closed her fingers over them with his own hand. "Okay," he said, "let's go see your new ride." They walked out of the glass doors and back into the sunlight. The new car was parked right near the entrance now. It gleamed under the bright sky. It was a silvery blue color, calm and strong. It wasn't a flashy sports car. It was a car that said, "I will get you home safely." Jenny stood in front of it, clutching the keys so hard they dug into her skin. It still didn't feel real. It felt like she was going to wake up on the side of the highway any second. "Go ahead," Keanu said, nodding toward the driver's side. "Try out." Push the button. Jenny walked to the door. She pulled the handle. It opened with a solid, reassuring thud. The inside smelled brand new, that specific scent of new fabric and clean plastic. She slid into the seat. It was comfortable. It hugged her back. She looked at the dashboard. There was a big start button. She took a deep breath. Her hand was shaking as she reached out. She pushed the button. The engine came to life. It was a quiet, smooth purr. The dashboard lit up with digital screens. The radio came on softly, playing some generic pop music. It felt perfect. There was no smoke, no shaking, no grinding noises. It felt like the future. Keanu stood outside the window, watching her. He gave her a thumbs up. Jenny rolled down the window. "It starts," she said, laughing in disbelief. "It actually starts." "It's a good car," Keanu said. "It will take care of you." Jenny sat there for a moment, her hands on the steering wheel. She thought about the morning. She thought about the fear, the heat, the hopelessness. And now, she was sitting in air conditioning, listening to a purring engine. The contrast was overwhelming. She looked up at Keanu. He was standing there with his hands in his pockets, looking content. He wasn't waiting for applause. He wasn't taking a picture for Instagram. He was just standing there, making sure she was okay. "You are an angel," she said. "You really are." Keanu shook his head, looking down at his shoes. "No angels here," he said. "Just people trying to help each other out. Listen, I have one favor to ask." "Anything," Jenny said instantly. "Drive safe," he said. "Buckle up. Make sure Sam buckles up. That's all I ask. That's the payment I want." "I promise," she said. "I promise." He nodded. "Good. Then my work here is done." He turned to walk back toward his Porsche. Jenny felt a sudden panic. He was leaving. The magical moment was ending. She wanted to say something else, something profound, but there were no words big enough. "Wait," she called out, opened the car door. He stopped and turned back. Can I give you a hug?" she asked. She felt shy asking, but she needed to touch his shoulder to feel the reality of him. A warm smile spread across his face. He walked back and opened his arms. Jenny stepped out of the car and hugged him. He wasn't stiff or distant. He hugged her back firmly, like a friend or a brother. He smelled like laundry detergent and the road. For a second, the world stood still. There was no celebrity, no stranger, no charity. Just two humans hugging in a parking lot. "Take care of yourself, Jenny," he whispered in her ear. Then he let go. He gave her one last nod, turned around, and walked away. He got into his low, black car. The engine roared to life, a deep, powerful sound. He put on his seatbelt, checked his mirrors, and slowly pulled out of the parking lot. Jenny stood by her new car, watching him go. He didn't speed off. He didn't show off. He just merged into traffic and became part of the flow of the city again, disappearing into the distance. She looked down at the keys in her hand. They were real. She looked at the car. It was real. She looked at the sky. It was blue, endless, and full of light. The heavy weight that had been crushing her chest for months was gone. It had lifted. Carried away by a man in a vintage Porsche who stopped on a highway. She got back into the driver's seat. She put on her seatbelt, just like he asked. She checked the mirror. She shifted into gear. She didn't look back at the dealership. She looked forward toward the road that led home. The drive home felt completely different from the commute Jenny had been making for the last 3 years. In her old car, every mile was a gamble. She used to listen to the engine, praying it wouldn't make a weird noise, watching the temperature gauge like a hawk. She would grip the wheel, her shoulders up by her ears, waiting for something to break. But this car was different. It hummed. It glided. The air conditioning blew cold air that smelled crisp and clean, chilling the sweat on her arms. Jenny found herself driving with just one hand on the wheel. Her shoulders finally dropped. She could hear the radio, clearly without the background rattle of a loose muffler. It was a strange feeling, almost like floating. As she drove, she kept glancing at the passenger seat. It was empty, but she could still feel the ghost of the man who had sat there. She could hear his voice telling her that it was just balancing the scales. She reached the turnoff for her neighborhood. The streets here were rougher, filled with potholes that would have made her old car groan in agony. The new car absorbed them easily. It felt unfair in a way, that something so nice was rolling through a place where everything was struggling, but it also felt like a beacon of hope. She pulled into the gravel parking lot of the apartment complex. It was a tired-looking building with peeling paint and a cracked sidewalk. Her new, shiny silver car looked out of place parked next to the rusted trucks and old sedans of her neighbors. She turned off the engine, and the silence rushed back. She sat there for a minute, just holding the key. It was a heavy key, solid and real. She looked up at her second-floor apartment. She could see the curtain move in the living room window. Sam was home. He was probably pacing the floor, worrying sick because she was so late. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lot. It wasn't raining, and the air was cooling down, but there was a breeze that rustled the dry leaves near the tires. Jenny took a deep breath and got out of the car. She locked it, hearing the reassuring beep of the alarm. She walked up the metal stairs to the second floor, her legs feeling lighter than they had in months. She reached the front door. It was a metal door, painted a chip blue. She put her key in the lock and turned it. The moment she stepped inside, Sam was there. He was 19, tall and lanky, with hair that stuck up in the back because he'd been running his hands through it. He looked frantic. "Jenny," he said, his voice high with relief. "I tried calling you, but it went straight to voicemail. I was about to call the police or the hospitals. I saw the tow truck from the window earlier, and I didn't see you come back. What happened? Are you okay?" He looked her over, checking for injuries. He saw the grease smudges on her face and her torn sneakers, but he also saw something else in her eyes, a calmness that hadn't been there in a long time. "I'm okay, Sam," she said. "I'm more than okay." "Where's the car?" he asked, looking toward the window. "Did you leave it at the shop? Please tell me it wasn't the transmission. I told you I could drop out and take that warehouse job." "Stop," Jenny said. Cut him off gently. She walked over to the window and pulled the curtain back. "Look outside." Sam frowned, confused. He walked over to the window and looked down. His eyes scanned the parking lot, skipping over the rusty trucks and the familiar neighbors' cars. Then his eyes stopped. He stared. He blinked. He turned to look at her, his mouth opened slightly. Who is that visiting? Did you borrow a car?" "No," Jenny said, smiling so wide her face hurt. "That's ours." "Well, it's mine, but it's for us." Sam rushed to the window and pressed his face against the glass. "What? How? I don't... Did you win the lottery? Did you take a loan?" He turned back to her, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. "Jenny, we can't afford a car payment. We barely make rent." "It's paid for, Sam," she said. "It's completely paid for. No loans. No payments." He stared at her like she was speaking a different language. "That doesn't make sense. Who gives away a free car?" Jenny walked over to the small, sagging couch and sat down. She patted the spot next to her. Sam sat down slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "It wasn't just someone, Sam," she began. She took a deep breath and told him the story. She told him about the engine blowing, the heat, the hopelessness. She told him about the Porsche pulling over. She watched Sam's eyes get huge as she described a man getting out. "Wait," Sam interrupted. "You're telling me Keanu Reeves? The guy from the movies? He picked you up?" "Yes," Jenny said. "He bought me a bottle of water. He waited with me. He listened to me talk about you, about school, about the rent. He didn't have to. He just did. And he just bought you a car?" Like, actually bought it? Jenny nodded. He said he's been in a dark place before. He said if you can pull someone out of the dark, you do it. He didn't want me to pay him back. He just wanted us to be safe. Sam leaned back against the couch, a look of utter disbelief on his face. He looked at the ceiling, shaking his head. That is insane, he whispered. That is actually insane. The world is crazy, but sometimes it's crazy in a good way. He did it for you, too, Jenny said, reaching over and squeezing his knee. He made me promise I would get you to school. He wants you to finish college, Sam, so you can't drop out. You have to promise me that. Sam looked at her, his eyes glassy. I promise, he said, his voice cracking. I'm not dropping out. Not ever. They sat there for a long time, letting the reality sink in. The fear that had been living in their apartment, like a thick fog, had lifted. The worry about the eviction notice, the stress of the commute, the dread of the next breakdown. It was all gone. It was replaced by a quiet, buzzing sense of possibility. The next few weeks were a blur of change, but a good kind of change. Jenny didn't have to wake up 2 hours early to worry if the car would start. She would get into the driver's seat, push the button, and go. She was never late to work again. Her boss noticed a change in her attitude. She smiled more. She worked better. Sam started his classes. He took the bus sometimes to save gas, but knowing the car was there if he needed it gave him a safety net he had never known. He studied late into the night, fueled by a newfound energy. He didn't have to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders anymore, knowing his sister wasn't breaking her back to support him. One evening, about a month after it happened, Jenny was driving home from the grocery store. The car was filled with bags of fresh food, real food, not just the cheap stuff that fills you up but doesn't nourish you. She had steaks and vegetables and fruit. She felt a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. She stopped at a red light. In the lane next to her was an older car. It looked like hers used to look, patched up, a little rusty. The driver was a young man, maybe a few years older than Sam. He looked exhausted. He was rubbing his temples with one hand and gripping the steering wheel with the other. He looked like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Jenny watched him. The light turned green, but he didn't move right away. He seemed distracted, lost in thought. The car behind him honked. He jumped and sped through the light. Jenny didn't honk. She just drove. She thought about Keanu. She thought about how easy it would have been for him to keep driving. He was a busy man. He had places to be, but he stopped. He saw a human being in need, and he made a choice to care. She realized then that the gift wasn't really the car. The car was just metal and plastic. The gift was the feeling of being seen, the feeling that she mattered, that her life mattered, even when things were bad. She promised herself that she would find a way to pass that on. She couldn't buy a car for a stranger. She wasn't rich, but she could pay attention. She could be the person who stopped. She could be the one who listened. When she got home, she parked the car in her usual spot. She turned off the engine and sat for a moment in the quiet. She looked at the keys in her hand. They were scratched now from being in her pocket and tossed on the table, but they still felt solid. She grabbed the groceries and walked up the metal stairs to the apartment. Sam opened the door before she even knocked. He was smiling, holding a textbook in one hand. I got an A on my midterm, he said, beaming. In economics. Jenny smiled, a genuine, deep smile that reached her eyes. That's amazing, Sam. I knew you could do it. We need to celebrate, he said. Maybe we can drive somewhere this weekend, just to see where the road goes. I'd like that, Jenny said. I'd really like that. She walked into the kitchen and started putting the groceries away. The fridge hummed. The sound of the traffic outside drifted into the open window, and the apartment felt full. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a movie set. It was just a small home, but it was a safe one. Jenny looked out the window one last time before she closed the blinds. The sun had set, and the streetlights had flickered on. The world kept turning, people kept rushing, and somewhere out there, Keanu Reeves was driving his car, maybe stopping to help someone else. She closed the blinds and turned back to her brother. The heavy wooden doors of the past were gone. The only doors left were the ones opening in front of them, and she was ready to drive through them.